Thank you for joining us for this session, The Glocal Voices of Places Burning Down. My name is Melanie Rideout, and I am leading Forum's work on environment and climate change. This is our final event of Communities for Earth Week, and I apologize for any background noise that you might hear. There is construction happening where I am. It's the new normal, I guess. We can't help these things. This is the end of a fantastic long week in which we have seen how communities around the world are fighting for environmental and climate justice. Forum Civ is committed to working with civil society and communities to find rights-based approaches, and we feel that this is the only way to get through the climate-induced crisis and emergency. I'm so pleased and happy today to have a Glocal Voices in which we have community members from across the world discussing how they address the climate-induced emergency. And we also have the chance for Ulrika Åkesson, who is the lead policy specialist for environment and climate at Sida, to moderate this session. Glocal Voices is all about bringing community voices to the fore and holding a platform for those voices to be heard and listened to by decision makers. And this is a great opportunity to have a discussion about how can we in the Swedish development policy and the development sector better support communities who are at the front line and at the forefront of fighting for environmental and climate justice. So I will hand over to Ulrika, who will moderate this session. Please, wherever it is that you're watching, feel free to write comments and we will take questions at the end. Ulrika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and really a great honor to be moderating this exciting session today. In this session, we will explore how at different levels, regions and locations are responding to the climate-induced emergency and bridging the gap between local and global action and decision-making. We will also talk about the importance of systems thinking and contextualized solutions, leveraging on local knowledge and individual starting points. And with us today, we have a fantastic panel of colleagues from representing different parts of the world, as Melanie said. We have Mohammed Yosuf from Islamic Relief Ethiopia. We have Gloria Holguin from FIAN Ecuador, and we have Taqiuddin from Islamic Relief Indonesia. And maybe we also have Sovann from Barnfonden's partner in Cambodia. But he had some internet connection problems, so I don't know at this point how that has developed the last couple of minutes. But with that, let's move over to hear from this fantastic panel, and we will get a 5-minute presentation from each presenter on how the emergency has affected them and how they are responding to it. And will cover both what the organization is doing and the impact of this work and how it leverages on local and contextual knowledge. So with that, I will hand over to Gloria to start off. Please, Gloria.
Well, hello. Good morning for me, afternoon and night for everyone else who's watching from other places. Well, I work at FIAN Ecuador, which is an organization that works on the right to food and food sovereignty. And from this approach is the way in which we approach environmental injustice. This work we do by accompanying peasant, indigenous, and Afro-Ecuadorian communities. And we also work on the strengthening of solidarity networks, such as the Network of Rural Women in Ecuador, or the Assembly of Organizations and Nationalities in the Ecuadorian coast. One thing we have in common with the organizations we work with is that we truly believe that the root of the problem of environmental injustice is the economic model we are immersed in. In that sense, we approach the crisis by promoting local production of food, no use of agrotoxic products such as chemical fertilizers, and the building of capacities of the youth and women on human rights and economic systems based on traditional ancestral knowledge and solidarity. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Then let me move over to Taki, please, Taki.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, good afternoon to all participants in this forum. In my place, it's night, already night at the 8 p.m. I'm Mohammed Taqiuddin from Konsepsi, a local partner of Islamic Relief Sweden and Islamic Relief Indonesia in implementing of supporting poor community to climb the Right in Climate Change project, which funded by the Forum SHIP in the period of 2018 up to 2020. We have worked in the three vulnerable communities from the impact of climate change in East Lombok District, West Nusa Tenggara Province, namely is rainfed farmers, salt farmer, and lobster cultivators. By this work, we have overall goal to ensure that women and men living from rainfed agriculture, salt production, and lobster cultivation can practice their right to receive support from the data bearers in adapting to climate change and make their livelihood more sustainable. This project was developed based on the objective condition that vulnerable community group, as previously mentioned, not have adequate information and knowledge about the phenomenon of climate change and its consequence, so that they have not been able to better anticipate, cope with, and adapt to its impact. This situation is possible come up because lack of their access to sources of climate-related information, and even they do not have access at all. They rely on local knowledge, which sources from their elders in predicting annual climate pattern as basis of their decision-making in commodities cultivation. At the government level, both provincial and district, climate change adaptation has not yet as a concern of local policy, both in planning and budgeting, even though the impact of climate change had been experienced by the community and had a damaged development outcome due to climate-induced disaster or emergency. What the organization is doing in government level, we had prepared climate projection for the next 30 years as basis for development planning, especially in determining the priority scale of location, beneficiaries, and programs on climate change adaptation related action. And then we encourage mainstreaming of climate change adaptation into development planning and budgeting. We facilitate multi-stakeholder partnership on climate change adaptation issues, and we had conducted capacity building for local government officials on climate change action plan. In community level, we conducted participatory climate capacity and vulnerability assessment. We introduced gender-based climate school and provide pilot project related climate change adaptation in 3 communities. And we also provide technical assistance and mentoring, include capacity building in village-based planning and budgeting on climate change adaptation. What about the impact of this our work in government level? We have availability of sub-national action plan for climate change adaptation in West Nusa Tenggara Province, which was ratified by Governor Decree. And we established the working group of climate change adaptation, and this working group has a strategic role in encouraging mainstreaming of climate change adaptation in planning and budgeting. And then climate change adaptation is one of the main concerns in subnational development policy. In community level, the existence of social institution, which we call Climate Change Adaptation Preparedness Community Association, to boil anticipation and adaptation capacities of community in mobilizing local effort to deal with the impact of climate change. And right holder can access climate information by the climate literacy for their climate adaptation strategies, both the self-rainfall measurement and access from government. And then women began to be actively involved in activities related to climate change adaptation effort at the community level. How it leverage on local or contextual knowledge. The assessment on the capacity, vulnerability, and needs of the target group for a climate change adaptation strategy was conducted in participatory approach that allowed to accommodate, to bring up, and to promote of local knowledge and practices. The project intervention with the scientific approach did not eliminate local knowledge, but was enriched local knowledge. The modules of climate learning for community were developed taking into account local initiative and practices. And the last, develop of climate learning website was containing local specific data and information combined with scientific climate data. That's my explanation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taki. And now I will move over to hear a bit from Mohammed in Ethiopia, Islamic Relief. Mohammed, please.
Okay, thank you. I will be presenting more of what Islamic Relief is doing in relation to climate-induced disaster, which is climate change. Both in terms of adaptation as well as mitigation. But I will try to present overall picture of what Islamic Relief is doing in this regard. But later on again, specifically the Forum Seed project that we're implementing related with the climate change. Regarding the adaptation, especially the most common climate disasters in Ethiopia is drought and flood mainly. The extreme heat is there, but the most common ones are these two. And they have been common in the last 5 to 6 years because of the El Nino effect. So from the adaptation point of view, what we are doing is we are harvesting water during the rain season so that the community can use it during the drought season. And we do this with the local community and the local government institutions. The other one is developing water schemes so that, again, in those remote areas where water is very scarce, people can get water for their livestock as well as for human consumption. We are mainly developing underground water. From mitigation, from adaptation again, we are also provide different nutritious food, whether in kind or in cash, so that people can feed their family members during the food insecurity period of the year. Again, the people that we are working with mainly depend on livestock rearing, so we also support them in producing fodder using the irrigation system. Again, another point is this one could be used both as mitigation as well as adaptation. That is livelihood diversification. Instead of people depending on a single source of income and the food, we support them to diversify by involving in income generating activities, mainly BT trade. So when it comes to mitigation, this we believe was the most important part. So for water resource development, instead of using the fuel that was commonly used by many organizations that develop water in Ethiopia, we are introducing the solar system, so to reduce the carbon dioxide emission to the environment, to reduce that. Again, from livelihood part of mitigation, what we are doing is, especially these things we are doing by the project funded by Forum Seed through IR Sweden. So we have several mitigation activities under this project that has been successful in areas where we are working. One is afforestation. You know, these areas, because of continuous drought, overgrazing, as well as cutting of trees for construction of houses and other related things, even for wood that they can use for as a fuel. So afforestation is one of the most commonly used activities by us as an intervention in those areas. So what we do is we establish nursery sites and we collect drought resistance and short maturing seeds of plants and trees from different parts of the country, and we grow there. Then we distribute the seedlings to the community so that they can reforest the environment, and the environment can be covered again with forest. And this is helping in both ways. One, by covering the already barren land. Again, also it is helping the overall biodiversity within that environment. The biodiversity is recovering. The other one is similar to that, which is area enclosure. What we calling area enclosure is, you know, as we said, the majority of the community is pastoralists, or they depend on livestock rearing for their food as well as income. So we take some part of the grazing land in collaboration with the community. Actually, it's not us who selected the area. It is the community. There are community representative committee who works on that. So they select an area where it has to be enclosed during rain season, and no encouragement is allowed by animals and or human for a specific period of time. So two things happen during that time. One, they preserve the especially fodder, which is grass for consumption during drought season, while they enclose it during rainy season. The second is, when this area included for several months, the biodiversity, including the species of plants and the grasses that has been disappeared long ago because of overgrazing and erosion and this what we call drought, they started to re-emerge. Even we have seen some animals are coming, wild animals are coming to those enclosed areas. For instance, for this Forum Seed funded project, we have enclosed around 150 hectares of land. So now it is active. So both the biodiversity and the further preservation has been achieved because of this. What do we mean is, if they do that during the rain season, they will have fodder for their livestock, especially for key breeding livestock during the drought season. At the same time, as we said, even during that season, it is not allowed to be encouraged by the livestock. Instead, they cut and give it to the livestock. So the biodiversity is kept there. Another activities that we do is distribution of energy saving stoves. You know, as we say, the community is commonly, not if it is because of the culture or because of common practice, but because of a survival issue. Again, people have to depend on wood. So they cut trees. They can use it as a fuel to cook food. So instead of what we are doing is, by this project, instead of solely depending on that, so again, to encourage them to reduce the cutting of trees, we are providing them with the energy saving stoves. These stoves have enabled it to save the energy up to 75% during the cooking of food and other related things. So we distribute this initially, but we supported the community locally to produce this kind of things. And also we link it with the markets where these energy saving stoves are available, so they can access. Again, as another mitigation measure, as I said earlier, livelihood diversification. As we said, since they are mainly depending on livestock rearing, which is solely depending on natural resources, we are helping them to diversify their food, their source of food. Again, that could also help as a source of income as well. So for that, what we are doing is diversify their livelihood. Instead of solely rearing livestock, maybe 50%, 40% of their income or in the food to come from this BT trade, which can be done without affecting the environment. I don't know if I have time, but again,
I think we can come back to you, Mohammed, and then you will get the chance to outline even more what you are doing within the field of climate change. But great to hear that. And now I would like to welcome. I think we have Sovann with us finally, and so Sovann is working for Barnfonden, a partner to Barnfonden in Cambodia. So please, Sovann, over to you.
Thank you so much, and sorry that I just access. You hear?
Yes, it works. It
Hello.
has some slight problems, but please go on and we'll see.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Sovann. I'm executive director of Northeastern Development. Short name NORD. I'm a partner of partnership with Child Fund in Cambodia. Implement the project on adaptive and resilient community in Cambodia, project 2. For the project, NOD has a collaboration with PCDM, MOI, and agriculture of the Cambodia government officer to provide training and awareness on disaster risk reduction, contingency plan, and climate change adaptation simulation exercise data into the community and commune council, including the 15 of the school in a target area. So before the project starting, often the citizen in this local was affected by the flood landslide into the Mekong River, and before the starting the project of the adaptive and resilient Cambodia in a community in Cambodia, most of the vulnerable people in here were affected by the climate change and the specialized are the children and disability people. So the achievement and experience that we achieved during the implement the project, we have create the contingency plan all the community in the target 8 community, and 15 of school that have the contingency plan for use in the community in the school also. And we also to provide training on agriculture that adaptive to the climate change adaptation to the students and community people who that responsible for the DRR and CCA. And teacher and the student have the full capacity for manage the DR and CCA by themselves. Example, the student and can provide the peer-to-peer on DR and CCA to the different in the school. And the community also can provide some experience to the community on CCA and DDR. And the community in 20 community in 41 village in the target area have a full skill on DDR and CCA, and can apply the capacity on DDR, DRR and CCA. And the school we have provide the training to the teacher and youth, including the representative of the children on DR and CCA, and they can apply this skill line, and to apply the skill line and provide the training to the other people in the community also. So I think that this project have helpful to the community people in the Cambodia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sovann. Now, I would like to go back to Gloria from FIAN in Ecuador and ask you a question. What can organizations, given what we heard, what can organizations learn from each other, and how can they support each other to move the climate agenda forward? Gloria, what do you say?
Well, I think the key is in strengthening the local knowledge, what people know in the ground.
Please again.
So we believe, for example, organizations.
Again.
Okay.
So I think someone needs to mute, maybe who's not speaking. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I was saying that the key is in the local knowledge, as many of the other people mentioned. So I guess we truly believe organizations have lots to learn from each other. They can learn from each other about recovering traditional consumption habits, ancestral medicine based on plants, cultural traditions on environmental recovery, traditional knowledge on taking care of the territories in a sustainable way, and also on commercialization of local products that allow for economic sustainability and to like a way to live in dignity. And I believe, or we believe, this support can happen through exchanges of knowledges promoted by the organizations themselves and by the consolidation of local, national, and international networks with common agendas. An example of that was that we have here in Ecuador was the recent meeting of the coordination group of the Rural Women's Network that happened this past weekend on the 5th, 6th, and 7th of June. And the women decided to meet in the Ecuadorian Amazonas because they didn't know that region and they didn't understand quite well the problems that women were facing in that region. And this space served as a space not only for coordinating actions that will allow for rural women to position their agenda with the new government's agenda, but also it served as a space for acquiring knowledge on the impacts of 50 years of exploitation of petroleum. For example, it served as a space for ratifying their conviction of the necessity to change this economic model that prioritizes money over life. And it served as a space for exchanging different ways in which rural women are resisting and are working on strengthening processes of alternative education and local clean production, like food production without the use of agrotoxics. So I believe this is what organizations can learn from each other and how they can support each other. I'll leave it at that. I don't know if anybody else.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, stressing partnership, I think that's really important. Now I would like to move over to Taki and ask you a question based on what we now have heard and discussed a bit. How do we convince duty bearers to support and listen to the most vulnerable in this climate-induced emergency that we are talking about? Over to you.
Okay, we'll be talking about how to convince the bearer to support and listen to the most vulnerable group in climate-induced emergency. We had developed and implement evidence-based advocacy. Evidence-based advocacy works requires us to provide empirical data and information from the field as results from series of studies or research by apply scientific approach. In addition, I think as evidence also can be drawn from the objective condition of a vulnerable group, from their view, their aspiration, as well as smart practices at the local level as a way of dealing with their own problems. The other side, to convince that the bearer, we must work by carry out in collaboration by the multi-stakeholder partnership, which involving the multi-sector, multi-level actor, multidiscipline, and multi-competence. I think it's my response, Ulrika. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what you brought up there is really also important, of the multidisciplinary and multi kind of stakeholder analysis in moving things forward. But then moving over to Sovann, and also before doing so, I just wanted to say also feel free to write any questions or thoughts or comments in the chat as we go, and then towards the end we will try to address what you bring up there. But Sovann, how do we, same question actually to you, it's very similar in this convincing duty bearers to support and listen to the most vulnerable. What's your take on that, and how do you look upon it? Please, over to you.
So, sorry, I cannot. Yes.
Sorry. I will repeat. So how do we convince duty bearers to support and listen to the most vulnerable in this climate-induced emergency that we are talking about today? What do you think is the best way forward in that work?
Thank you. For my experience, I think another work should work closer work with duty bearer and try to explain and plan or coaching to them about the negative impact of the disaster and climate change. Moreover, we should facilitate with them to develop the contingency plan, because the contingency plan have identify the vulnerable people. We should to train about the simple of model of the fundraising for response to an emergency happen. I think that if we have a lobby to them that target area, to them that we also to lobby them about the effectiveness of your role and the task of responding on time to vulnerable people that are affected by climate change. So I think we should collaboration and work close and partnership with the government or government and local authority in the Northeastern area to support and the technical of the climate change and to them. And after they got the full skill, the Northeastern area and cannot respond by themselves, respond some knowledge or respond to some material or some material or some the budget respond to the community people that affected by the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Sovann. And then finally in this round, I just want to move over to Mohammed and ask you, as Islamic relief works in both humanitarian and development context, and how do you see and respond to climate change with both these lenses and within the nexus of humanitarian and long-term development cooperation? If you would like to explore that a bit, please.
Okay, thank you. I think there is echo. It's coming. Yes, we are working in both cases, both humanitarian and development, because this climate change has an impact on both of them. In the short run, it is affecting the lives and the well-being of the community. In the long run, again, it is affecting the livelihood of the community, which leave them with food insecurity and the other crisis. Because when drought and flood is happening, it is depleting their key resources or key assets, which they depend on for livelihood. So it is affecting both in the short run and the long run. What we are trying to do is in the short run, especially when the emergency hits or during humanitarian assistance, what we can do is mainly just to respond to immediate needs of the community without affecting the long-term well-being of the community as well as the environment. But in the long run, I think we are trying to rehabilitate the land using local knowledge and local community. And in that we are working both on awareness raising of the community on what is happening globally and its as well as locally and its impact on the community, both in the long and the short run. Again, we are also trying to work with local community and the government to develop local knowledge further, because there are traditional knowledges that can be developed further and support the community if they are encouraged, if they are integrated with the scientific techniques. So we are trying to capacitate the community both to respond in the short run during the humanitarian crisis, again to work on durable solutions in the long run. How durable solutions? For instance, by rehabilitating the land, as we said, through afforestation. It could be water and soil conservation, and again using this solar and other energy technology instead of depending on fuel or cutting trees for wood. So integrating both. For instance, if we are working in one area during the crisis season as a humanitarian response, again, instead of going out of that area at the end of the emergency response, we are following that, trying to mobilize resources that we can follow up with development activities. So the similar thing may not happen in the future, though during the last 5 years it's happening because of this El Nino. But I think there is durable solutions that are coming at the field level. People, one, they are switching to, as I said, to other sources of energy. Again, diversifying their source of income and food. Again, through the capacity building, they are doing different activities, somehow differently from, instead of just following the traditional route, they are trying to integrate the skills and knowledge they have developed during the project life. So we are trying to integrate both the development and the emergence.
Thanks, Mohammed, for explaining that. I think really interesting to hear and to further develop how this nexus can be moved even further between long-term development and humanitarian work. Now, I before moving into the last question I had for all the panelists, I know that there are some questions, I think, in the chat. So maybe we can have a look at them, Melanie, if you have them there. So yeah, the first question, how to increase awareness to the private sector or any actor who still continue their business as usual, even worsening the climate-induced emergency impact. Anyone with any thoughts on that who would like to start?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
You can see the question actually in front of you on the screen.
Yes,
it's how to increase awareness to the private sector or any other actors who still continue their business as usual, even worsening the climate-induced emergency impact. Does anyone want to reflect on that quickly? Or
I guess
Gloria?
Yeah,
start off, please.
I believe is like there's private sector that is very difficult to believe that they're gonna increase their awareness, because a lot of business people in the private sector believe that what they're doing is not causing any damage, and they're like blind. So I believe what really needs to be done is to have like people in power or governments have to actually make strict the compliances of laws that protect human rights and the environment. But I guess I can talk about that later. But I really don't believe that it's that easy to, like, people that are not aware at this point are not going to be aware, or they don't care. I mean, that's how I see it. Because if you don't see it by this point, you just don't care, or you're definitely blind.
And thanks. That's a thought-provoking, or one way of looking upon this. Anyone has reactions on that, to what Gloria just said, or to the question?
May I add something?
Yeah, sure. Mohammed?
Though in remote areas where we are working, we don't have that kind of platforms, but there is platforms in Ethiopia, public-private and NGO forums, especially in big cities, where the private sector and the public, as well as the government, when I say the public, and the NGOs work together in alleviating certain problems and being on the same page on different issues that can impact the private sector, the public, and the country, the community as a large. And so NGO plays a facilitation role between the government and the private sector, as well as other sectors within this platform. So I think where we are working, we can develop similar platforms. And one of the things that maybe the private sector, they are not that much aware about what they are doing is how it is impacting the environment and the community, the lives of the community and livelihood, both in the short and the long run. So I think working on the awareness raising is one important issue, I believe, especially on the private sector, especially within the private sector who can play a decision role, especially the managers and the owners of the business. We can work with them. Another thing is working with the local government. I think those who are, especially those who are issuing the license to the private sector in a specific sector. So I think that if we working advocacy in that area, I think will help that so those who are giving the license to the private sector can also put some kind of prerequisite or requirements within the life while giving the license, so that the private sector, if they cannot even reduce their impact, if they cannot reduce the external impact, I think they can minimize their impact, what they are contributing negatively to in terms of aggravating the climate change. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mohammed. We'll get back to you. I think it's interesting to hear. It's another approach. There, you talked about raising awareness and actually influencing the private sector. So, but anyone else has any thoughts on this in particular? If not, we have another question coming up. So let me pose that one. If you could create one rule for the whole world to address environmental and climate injustice, what would it be? Oh, that's a challenging question. Can I now start with Taki? Do you have any thoughts on this, or Sovann?
Talking about the one rule, yeah, for the world to address environmental and climate injustice, I think it's the right-based approach. It's the rule must be accommodate the right-based approach. I think by this approach, everyone is included in the climate policy development. Like the SDGs, no one left behind. I think women and men can equal opportunity to access, to participate, and to control in the climate change decision making. That's my response, Ulrika.
Thanks so much. Anyone else who has? Yeah, let's do a round on this one. Gloria, please.
I think it's difficult to think of one rule and then you believe on how to implement it. But I think the rule should be the respect of human dignity, because I think that's what's being at the bottom of it. That's it.
Well, perfect. Thanks. Very clear. Anyone else? Sovann, do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah. Or maybe, let's see if we can hear you. I know you have very bad rains where you are.
My internet cannot. Yeah.
No worries. If it's problematic, let's move.
Cannot.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. Mohammed, do you have anything you wanted to say on this one rule? Sorry, we can't hear you. Yeah.
You can't hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. I think the first thing is that acknowledging that the problem is there. I think at all levels there is still the recognition is not there, the acknowledgement is not there that this problem is happening and it's getting worse from time to time. And start to work together to reduce it, if we cannot eliminate completely at once.
Thanks. Very, yeah, interesting thought. I think we have more questions coming in, so let's move to the next one. A question again to all speakers. What is the key indicator that your intervention has reduced the climate crisis? Okay, so I think here, yeah, how do you ensure that what you do actually makes change or things happening? I think when it comes to the climate crisis, I think that's more or less the question. And of course, that's complex given everything you do. But if you pick something, who wants to start? Gloria?
Okay, that's a difficult question, but I guess the only way, I mean, these days there are theories that say that there's no way of measuring how fast the climate crisis or the global warming is happening, and we don't know when the world is going to collapse. So I think it's also as difficult to measure how our interventions have reduced the climate crisis. But I believe the best way of measuring is at the very local level. Like, I mean, if you work with like peasant organizations and you're working with them, strengthening local food production without the use of chemicals and local exchanges and local commercialization, you can measure the impact by knowing they're doing okay and they're being able to live in dignity with that activity. I mean, they're being able to eat healthy, sell and exchange some of their products. There's no hunger and there's no economic like crisis in terms of like that they need $1 or $2 to get whatever they're not producing. And I think that's how we could measure it in that way, with the very local level.
Yeah, but that's good. It's good to get very specific and also local examples of how you look upon it. So maybe anyone else with thoughts on this? Taki, do you have any?
If we're talking about the key indicator, is very difficult, as the Gloria mentioned before. But in my views, if we want to see the indicator, I think is the government level. We can ensure the reduce the climate crisis if the climate change adaptation or mitigation has become one concern in development policy. Or the other route, climate change become the mainstreaming in local development policy. Itu the first. And then the second, I think in the community level, we have developed a community has preparedness for climate change impact by the institution, like we develop institution with we capacity building, we provide the smart practices and at all. Okay, Ulrika.
Thanks for that also very very specific answer. Now there are more questions coming in here, and maybe I'll give this one to Mohammed for a start. How to encourage villagers, especially to be more aware of climate change issues? Sometimes it's challenging to convince the community that the crisis is really there. Please share your experience. Yeah, I think this one is a challenge for everyone. I mean, it's happening already, but how do you involve communities and to see and also prepare for the climate crisis, visible or not visible, to everyone in that context? Please, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you. Actually, yes, especially in the rural areas, it is difficult to convince the community that the problem exists, because they are not that much dependent on they are not that much, they do not see the impact instantly. But in the remote areas where we are working, I think because of this drought that is happening from time to time, through awareness, the community start to realize that the climate change is really happening and it is a problem, that it is affecting the climate, I mean, their livelihood as well as their life. It's because, you know, to take an example, in areas where we are working for the last 5 to 6 years, you know, they used to have rain 3 times or 2 times a year, but now they are lucky even if they have once. So they started to realize that that is coming, but they may not exactly know what is behind the problem, why this rain is not coming as usually on the raining season as it happened to used to be. So working on awareness raises how this affects the frequency of the rain, the intensity of the rain. And again, they can also see that from the extreme heat that is happening, especially in lowland areas where for instance, the heat used to be maybe 38 or 40, now 41, 42. So though they may not have the measurement, when they hear from the people who have the information, especially from the local authorities or people who are working with the NGO, even when we are working with the local community, I think they start to understand. But the most important approach, I guess, is to work with the community leaders and the elders, again, religious leaders as well, whom the community can listen to and whom the community, most of the time, because they are the opinion makers in those areas. So whatever they say, the community most of the time listen to them and they started to act as per their the recommendation is, as per their direction. So trying to work with the community leaders at the same time, trying to improve the awareness of the community at the village level or at the community level.
Thanks, Mohammed. I think this is such an interesting question. So I'll let someone else also come in on this. I don't know if Gloria or Taki would like to do so, if Sovann still has connection problems.
I can try, but I don't know if that... See, I believe I see it differently than the colleague that spoke before, because I think I guess it's because we work with peasant communities specifically that are working for the production of food. But I believe peasant communities are very aware of the climate change and very aware of the environmental injustices, because peasant communities always had the climate on their mind because of the seasons for putting the seeds in the land and then picking up the products and all this. And then when climate change starts happening, they're the first ones to be affected by it. And also because environmental injustices such as like the pollution and contamination of water resources are also peasants and indigenous communities the first ones to feel it. Because I mean, when a mining company comes into the territory, they don't go into the cities, they go to the rural areas, and the peasants are the ones that start receiving those impacts. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think we need to raise awareness on them.
Okay, thanks for giving that different perspective. Now I would like to take one more question from the floor or from the listeners or viewers. What actions could duty bearers and civil society organizations take to better incorporate gender equality and women's empowerment into policies, programs, and financing for climate change? Who would like to address that? Taki, would you like to start off?
Okay, we'll try to respond this question. Based on our experience, pay attention on the gender aspect, we developed the gender-based climate school. By this intervention, we ensure that men and women must be actively engaged in the climate literacy, because mostly of the the woman usually get impact more than the men. We by this intervention, we our work had increased the participation the woman farmer in the climate school activity, like the rainfall measurement, and then the agro ecosystem observation, and then discussion in the community level. From this, from our experience, I think is gender must be integrated with the climate change adaptation issue.
Thank you so much for giving that perspective from your end. Mohammed, do you have any thoughts on this? How could we, or how could you, where you work, better incorporate gender equality and women's empowerment in what you do?
Yeah, actually, in the previous From Seed project that I have mentioned, it has 3 components like gender equality, climate, environmental rehabilitation, as well as livelihood diversification. So through livelihood diversification, mainly on women economic empowerment, because one, I think the civil society organization is that in those areas, in those remote areas, where the pastorality reside, by now many of them have understood that the climate change is affecting women and the girls more than the rest of the community. Why? Because, for instance, in those areas where we are working, women are responsible for fetching water, for collecting water from the water sources. So if there is no water, if the drought is happening again and again, the area where they can get water is becoming far away from them. So they have to, for instance, during the rain season, maybe they can get water within 10 minutes, but during the drought season, they have to go 3 hours or 4 hours back and forth. So, you know, even it is affecting the girls' education. Instead of going to family sending the girls to school, they are sending them to fish water, and the fishing water is taking half from their daily time. So it is forcing women and the girls to involve in this kind of activities. So they are being marginalized from productive activities like going to education and earning, engaging in income generating activities. So I think civil society is already working on that, but on the duty bearers, there are women and the children affairs offices. So we are closely working with them, and we are during the discussion we had with we have women group who discuss issues that is happening to women. So we invite them there, the duty bearers, and they listen to them, and they start to understand what is happening. So we see that even the government at the field level, local level, they are allocating budget for this kind of activities. For instance, on gender campaign, environment, and related issues. So the first thing, they are already exposed to that, but giving more exposure to the problem that is happening at the field level, what the women and the girls are facing day to day.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks for really giving us a good perspective on how you work with it. I have such an interesting here last question from the public or from the listeners, and on the COVID-19, how to deal with climate change these days while we are facing COVID-19 as well. Will the remedies to climate change be worse than the disease itself? And here I would like to turn over to Gloria, please. Do you want to reflect on this?
Yes, hi. Well, on the question before, I was going to say duty bearers need to put budget into policies, budget specifically for gender issues and gender, like women's role in this decision making aspects. And also there needs to be mechanisms created that make it an obligation for political parties and for the different political areas to include women And in that sense, civil society needs to work with women, strengthening their capacities and strengthening their knowledge on their rights and the rights of nature as well. But then in terms of this question, sorry, I didn't want to not answer the one before. How to deal with climate change these days? I guess for us at FIAN Ecuador, we did research last year. By June, we produced a report on the impacts of COVID-19 on peasants' rights. And we noticed that a lot of the bigger impacts are on women because, for example, education went to like homeschooling, and then women had to deal with that as well. And then health, like when people were getting sick, women also had to take care of that. But I have very few time. So I believe COVID showed us a way of dealing with climate change, because by going back to our homes and by going back to our communities, a lot of water resources and rivers had the time to recover themselves. And also people had the possibility of rethinking the model, the economic model we live in, and returning to the idea of producing food in their own land without depending on the companies that sell toxic or fertilizers, chemical fertilizers that we call agrotoxic products, because there was no money, no income, no money, so you had to deal with it on your own. And I think actually one of the good things of the COVID crisis was that it allowed for at least some of the peasant organizations in Latin America to really rethink the idea of how we can work for this, reversing the climate change crisis and working for environmental justice.
Thanks, Gloria. So actually what you say is something positive as well that actually come out of this. So that's how I hear you. Now we have 3 minutes left and you will get one sentence each basically to answer a final question. And that is, what would your what recommendation would you give to decision makers and world leaders? It's a big question for a very short time to answer, but if you can give one idea of that, a recommendation from your side, it would be fantastic, given what we have talked about today. So I'll start with Mohammed, if you're still there.
So I just came back. Okay.
Yes, you get one half minute to answer. What recommendation would you give to decision makers and world leaders, given what we have talked about today in the climate crisis and climate emergency?
The recommendation, I think, whatever is happening in any part of the world is affecting the rest of the world. So all decision makers, be it politicians and the others, I think they have to be aware whatever is happening within their country or in their localities, not only affecting that specific environment or specific area, but it is contributing negatively or positively to whatever to globally.
Thanks, Mohammed. Taki.
Okay, my closing statement is the climate-induced emergency have related to the rights, dignity, livelihood, and well-being of everyone without exception, men and women. In the fact, vulnerability to the impact of the climate crisis in unequally distributed, and its implication had been experienced by rural community, especially for the most vulnerable group. Therefore, global leaders and policymakers at various decision level must be practice right-based approach integrated with the principle of being inclusive, sustainable, and building resilience in dealing with it by taking into account the local context. or the other routes, action or innovation related to climate change adaptation must be directed as context-specific solution.
Thanks, very clear, Taki. Thanks so much. Gloria.
Yes. Well, I have 6 recommendations. I will try to be fast. The first one is to listen to the people. There are people speaking up everywhere in the world, and governments are not listening. The other recommendation is for governments to govern for people's interests before transnational corporations' interests. Most of the cases where we have environmental damage happens as a result of the implementation of extractive projects in a big scale, such as mining, petroleum exploitation, and like huge amounts of land destined for crops of one product only. Another recommendation is to promote local production, local consumption, and food sovereignty based on solidarity networks. Another recommendation would be to promote international regulatory frameworks that prioritize the respect of human rights and environmental rights over commercial agreements that prioritize corporations' rights. One example is the process towards a legally binding instrument on transnational corporations and other businesses enterprises with respect to human rights that is happening at the United Nations since 2013, I believe, and states should agree to that. And the last recommendation would be to respect and realize the national frameworks, such as the Ecuadorian, that contemplate the construction of a plurinational state, the rights of nature, and food sovereignty. And I mean respecting these existing frameworks when they do exist, because in the practice, the governments are not respecting those frameworks and they're prioritizing other interests. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Gloria. I think that was also very clear in terms of what you put forward. When it comes to Sovann, since there's such a bad connection, I think maybe you can write it and I can read it out towards the end or something. But otherwise, with that, and it's been really fascinating hearing from all of you of the local perspective, the local perspective and the global one kind of combined. But I will hand over to the Deputy Secretary General, Mrs. Ingrid Sievert-Udén, to give some closing remarks, actually for the whole week, if I've understood it right. So thanks for now, and handing over to Ingrid, please.
Thank you so much, Ulrika, and thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone listening and watching. And I have the honor to wrap up this Earth Week that we've had. And it's certainly been a full week of interesting, inspiring, and wonderful sessions. And I think the main takeaway is that climate and environmental justice must have civil society and communities at its heart. We must take an intersectional sectional approach and ensure that no one is left behind. I want to give just a few highlights on and recaps of what's happened this week, because we kicked off on Monday with when we asserted Forum Civ's commitment to fighting for climate and environmental justice. And we had presentations from across Forum Civ's offices, Elizabeth Mutitu, Wilson Tatunya, Richard Burpee, and Ognian Radonich, that were participating from different offices of Forum Civ. And since then, during this week, we have had seminars and workshops where we have discussed, for example, or actually all of them I will list, the child rights within climate policy. This was led by Barnfondens Secretary General Martina Hibel. And we there concluded that children must be considered at every level of our climate programming. We had Elham Yousefian from IDA, who had a wonderful panel with speakers from ILO, IDMC, McGill University, and My Rights, where they spoke on climate change, how that impacts those with disabilities, and how persons with disabilities are not inherently vulnerable. It's rather that it's the barrier and choices of able-bodied persons that create these vulnerabilities. And the takeaway from that session, I think, is that it's better to ask awkward questions to ensure inclusion rather than ignoring and not hearing diverse and powerful people's voices. We had also 2 different workshops, one run by Barnfonden and the other by Friends of the Earth, together with the organization MEN. And these workshops focus on making our programming more inclusive of child rights and of considering masculinities and the impact on climate justice. So thank you for those workshops that were very interesting. And then finally today, we have now just been part of this very interesting Glocal Voices on local action to global climate crisis. And Ulrika Åkesson, thank you so much for leading this. Excellent moderation, and to the speakers, knowledgeable and interesting speakers that we have just heard. I won't be Sovann, Mohammed, Gloria, and Taki. Thank you so much. We have also during the week had the art festival. Thank you to those organizations that came together and made beautiful things happen. From music videos, from Movimentos Sem Terra, through artworks from the ABC partner schools in Nepal. There have been many contributing to this. Visual Arts and Media Festival, Islamic Relief, Hand in Hand, Latinamerika-grupperna, ABC Sweden, Framtidsjorden, Proslavi Paravak, MST, WFID, the Hunger Project Sweden, and Regnskogsföreningen. And of course, behind the scenes to make this week happen, we have had our Forum Civ team, Amos, technical support, as well as Art Festival co-curator, Linnea, communications and social media lead, Claes, webmaster, Carlos and Agnes, communication and podcast leads, and of course, Melanie, who has really coordinated our whole Earth Week and also been Art Festival co-curator. To finish up on just a few thoughts, well, as we have really been thinking of all week, climate justice cannot be achieved without engaging communities, civil society, and those who are often left out of the discussion. Climate justice is about participation and consideration for people and planet. This Communities Earth Week does not end here. In a couple of weeks' time, we will be releasing our first podcast episode of the year, and it will be a conversation with youth climate activists. And in August, we will be starting our training program in Forum Civ's Rights Way Forward methodology, which is a training program for all wanting to learn about community mobilization from a rights-based approach. So please keep your eyes on our website and follow this and join us. Thank you again, and good luck to all of us in our important work ahead. And remember, listen to the people. Thank you very much, and goodbye.